Hey guys, welcome to the New England Scrapper. Now today I'm doing a very basic video on how to get started scrapping, as well as some scrap steel tips. Now this video is for beginners who don't know what this is, don't know how to get started, that sort of thing. You know, they may have heard, hey, you can make money scrapping, or something like that, and they want to know more. That's who this video is intended for. So, if you know anything about scrapping, if you are a scrapper, welcome. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And let's get started. So, what is scrap metal? Scrap metal is basically any piece of metal that's broken or old, not really usable anymore. It's at the end of its life cycle. And it'll get sold to a couple different companies and people. Eventually it'll get melted down at a furnace and made into new rolls or ingots, like rolls of sheet metal or ingots, bricks, blocks, whatever you want to call them. And that'll eventually get made into new cars and furniture, chairs, bikes, appliances, electronics, all sorts of cool stuff. Now, if you're scrapping, the most common type of scrap you're going to find is scrap steel, so that's what this video is focusing on. And again, there's non-ferrous, which is very important to you new scrappers. So I've got a couple of videos on how to identify different types of non-ferrous, stuff like that. But I'm going to do like an all-encompassing video of everything else that's not scrap steel that you're going to want to look out for while you're out doing the things that I'm going to explain in this video. Now, the best way to identify scrap steel, like this piece right here, is A, it's rusting, or B, it sticks to a magnet. The best surefire way is if it sticks to a magnet. Now, it could also be iron, but steel is a combination of iron and I think it's limestone and coke, which is a superheated coal, something like that. That's pretty much how steel is made. I don't think it's technically an alloy, but I could be wrong on that one. So that's basically how to identify steel. Now, the really good thing about scrap steel is usually you can leave it contaminated with plastic and stuff like that when you sell it, like this Dremel tool here. And this, this sticker, there's some plastic on the back of this thing. It's getting the frame here. Something like that. So both of those pieces can go as scrap steel. Now, where are you going to find scrap steel? You can find this stuff almost everywhere. Now, it's probably the lowest value by weight compared to aluminum, brass, copper. It's cents rather than dollars per pound. Reliably, if you've got a truck and trailer, van, something like that, you could reliably fill it up a couple times a day in the right area, doing the right, right sourcing, and reliably make anywhere from, again, depending on the prices, which I'll get to in a bit, you could reliably make anywhere from 20 to 150 bucks a day. So, to get started scrapping, what you're going to want to do if you live in like the suburbs or a city area that has public trash pickup that allows like bags and piles of garbage along with garbage cans. So like a not fully automated garbage system. If you have that, perfect, you can go street scrapping. So what that means is take your vehicle and just kind of cruise around town and go poking through piles of garbage. Now, the way I do it, and it's the best way to do it, it makes you look better as a scrapper and as a person if you don't start ripping through people's trash bags. So what I would recommend is only go through trash cans that don't have a bunch of bags in them. Like if there's some construction waste in one, something like that. Now again, you need to check your local laws to make sure you're allowed to do this, but I think in most places in the States, as well as multiple other countries, this is totally legal. It's totally fine. Now, another way you can find scrap is going dumpster diving. It's another really popular way. Now, you could use the commercial dumpsters again, like behind stores, stuff like that. But again, you need to look at your local laws. Some states and countries allow it. Others, it's a hard no. Like in the UK, you can't go through people's dumpsters. Also construction dumpsters, but again, you have to be careful with those. It can be dangerous. You don't know what's in there. And again, it could be illegal in your area, so you need to check. Another way that's not illegal ever, well, most likely, is Craigslist. That's a great way to get scrap. Now, you can look through the free section. People have all sorts of ads. I mean, I've seen free cars on there. If you have a truck and trailer, go ahead. There you go. There's a couple $100 right there. But people advertise all sorts of stuff. Old bikes and washing machines, dryers, refrigerators. You can get all sorts of scrap off of Craigslist. And what you can also do is actually put up an ad. If you do it the right way, you can do it for free. And, you can put up an ad saying, hey, I'm doing scrapping. I collect scrap metal within this mile radius. Give me an email, give me a call, whatever, however you set up your profile and your ad. Now, before you start scrapping, and before you go out and collect all your glorious scrap steel and non-ferrous metals, you're going to want to do some research. And you're going to want to do research on the place that you're going to sell your scrap metal to. The scrapyard. It's the most important part of this entire scrapping venture for you. If you do not have a scrapyard, and a good, trustworthy scrapyard at that, you can't get any money. You're not going to get paid. So, there's no point. So, what you're going to want to do, and again, I want to stress this because it's very important, is you need to find a good, trustworthy scrapyard. There's a very important part that not everyone knows, especially beginners, about the scrap industry, the scrap world, is it's two-sided. You have good scrapyards and good scrappers, and you have bad scrapyards and bad scrappers. And bad scrapyards will, be super dirty, be super messy usually. They'll try to scam you for stuff. They scam you out of money, give you BS reasons why something isn't what it is, something like that. A good example is if you drive into a scrapyard and they don't have a scale or something like that. If they look at your truck and go, oh, I'll give you $20 for the lot instead of weighing you up, you should probably turn around and leave because they're probably pulling something. Almost every scrapyard will pay you by weight. And that's all scrap works that way, except for catalytic converters. Most of those will usually be paid a certain amount per catalytic converter. So usually with scrap steel, it's by the ton. I've seen it anywhere from $30 a ton to $300 a ton for light iron. And yeah, again, it's commodity pricing, so supply and demand, it goes, let's see if I can get this right. The price goes down when the supply is hot. When the supply is high and the demand for it is low. The prices go up for you when the demand is very high, but there's not a lot of supply of scrap steel coming in. That's basically how it works. And that's with all scrap. I'm using steel because that's most likely what you're going to be after if you're just starting. So, a good way to find scrapyards is go on Google. You could just type in scrapyards near me. Look through some of the reviews. Another good, probably better way, if you are able to do this, is check out a place like the iScrapApp.com. They post all sorts of scrap tips and scrap stuff. You can learn a lot from them as well as find a good scrapyard. I trust them. I believe the owner of that runs a scrapyard himself. I think it's in New Jersey. Anyways, check that out. They have an app, they have a website. It's a really good place to find a good scrapyard. Another way, and probably the best way, is a friend or a family member that you trust that goes to a scrapyard that they trust. You know, that's probably the best way to find a scrapyard. You know, talk to them. Like I said, you know, maybe you heard about this from, you know, maybe your grandfather or something. Maybe he mentioned, oh, I'm going to the scrapyard to sell this, you know. Maybe talk to him about it. Maybe he knows a good scrapyard, and maybe you can even go with him sometime to talk to the people, talk to the scale house guys, forklift operators, whatever, the office people, the people that you're going to be coming in contact with when you bring in your own scrap. And that's a great time to ask them questions, ask them how their process works, stuff like that. A good scrapyard will have no problem answering those. A good scrapyard will want to teach you things. They won't want to scam you out of money, stuff like that. Now again, you also need to be careful, because if you go to a bad scrapyard and you start asking a lot of questions, they're going to know, hey, you know, this guy's new, he doesn't know a lot about this, let's take him for all he's got, or all she's got. So, again, you need to be careful when you go for the first time, because again, they don't know you, unless, they're not going to know you. So they're not going to know whether you're going to be the good scrapper that is trying to learn, trying to get everything right, trying to separate things properly, or the bad scrapper who's trying to sneak things in they shouldn't, separate things, and then sneak less expensive things into the more expensive categories of scrap, stuff like that. Now, I got lucky. I was able to find a good scrapyard. The guys there are more than happy to answer any questions I have, you know, teach me something that I don't know. There's always something you can learn in scrap. There's always something. It could be as simple as, oh, that's actually got this metal in it, so, you know, maybe you should look into picking that up when you see them. You can always learn something. Anyways, like I said, you're going to sell your scrap by weight. So, take your car, your truck, your van, truck and trailer, dump truck, whatever you have to collect scrap. And once you found that good, trustworthy scrapyard, you called ahead, you talked to them, you drove in, went, you know, with your list of questions, talked to them, that sort of thing. What you're going to do is you're going to load your vehicle with all your scrap steel and or your non-ferrous, but I'm basically going to explain how you're going to sell your scrap steel. Now, if you have a lot, alright, so when you drive in, they're going to have a truck scale, and most likely a non-ferrous shed. What you're going to want to do is, again, ask them how they want you to do this when you first come in, but most scrapyards have one truck scale, some have two, but most that I've been to had one. So you're going to pull up onto the scale, and they're going to weigh you in, and that's called tearing in. They're going to weigh you and the vehicle, or just the vehicle with you out of it. Now the important thing is, when you weigh back out, you need to be where you were when you weighed in. If you were in the vehicle when you weighed in, you need to be in the vehicle when you weigh out. If you're out of the vehicle when you weighed in, you need to be out of the vehicle when you weigh out. So they're going to take your weight, and they'll usually point you to a pile. Especially if you have a large amount, this is what you're going to do. Some scrapyards don't give you a choice. For scrap steel, you have to go over the large scale. And those go up in 20-pound increments. Most of the time. Every scrapyard I've been to, it's been 20-pound increments. So it goes 20, 40, you know. So every 20 pounds, it adds that on to your... Anyways, you're going to pull off, you're going to go over to the pile that they direct you to, and you're going to throw your scrap steel onto the ground, onto the pile, whatever. Now, if you have a very small amount, like a small Ford Ranger or a car, something like that, a lot of scrapyards will allow you to go to the non-ferrous shed. And what they'll do there is they'll give you like a 55-gallon drum or some type of bin. They'll bring it to your car, usually with a forklift, or they'll have one right inside the door. And what that'll allow you to do is they'll weigh your scrap on a smaller scale, on the non-ferrous scale, which goes up in, usually I think it's about 1 pound increments, but some could also be half a pound, and some could even be a quarter of a pound, but maybe ask that when you go there. So that's basically how you're going to scrap it, or how you're going to sell your scrap. So once you've dumped it in the pile or whatever, you're going to drive back out onto the truck scale, and they're going to weigh you out. And that's called tearing out. Now, when you're done and they pay you, they're going to give you a scale slip. And that's basically going to tell you what your weight was coming in, weight coming out, and it's also going to tell you your net weight, which is the amount of scrap that you sold them. Check that, make sure it seems good. And another thing is, always check your scale tickets, especially if you're selling non-ferrous. Before you cash out, if you can see that and you see they made a mistake, a good scrapyard will have no problem fixing that. And technically, until you cash out, you're legally entitled. I'm pretty sure you're legally entitled to taking your scrap back if they refuse to fix mistakes. Again, maybe not in every area, but in some, I believe that's how it works. And again, if they throw everything into one bucket and weigh it up as light iron, and you had clean aluminum in there, time to pack up your stuff and go home, because that scrapyard is not worth your time. So check your scale slip, stuff like that. It's just important tips. Now, to make more money with your scrap, there's another type of scrap steel that you're going to want to keep an eye out for. And that's called number 1 HMS, or heavy melting steel. Number 1 steel. And I think this is across the board, at least the scrapyards I've talked to, is they want it at least 1/8 of an inch thick, and it has to be under 4 feet long. Some scrapyards will be more picky about that than others, especially the 4 feet long part. Some scrapyards, if you have it like half, a quarter of a foot over, they're going to dock you for it. And if they do that, it may be time to leave and find a different scrapyard. Now here's a, I know it's dark, but here's an example of it. See how this is, this is about as thick as my thumbnail. Best way to do it, take a tape measure, take a ruler, and just put it on the end of it, see where it measures up. That's probably the best way. Yeah, you could use a cutting torch to cut stuff that's over 4 feet long, 5 feet long, whatever your scrapyard does. But unless you really know how to do that, that's probably not recommended. So at that point, they'll give you a little lower price for it. I think it might be like $20 less a pound, something like that, because they have to cut it up with their shear or a torch. Anyways, keep your eye out for that. Cast iron can usually also get put in with a number 1 HMS, but check with their scrapyard, they may not want that in there. Oh, that's another really important thing. Every scrapyard is different. The way they grade things, the way they categorize things, stuff like that. So again, you really need to talk to them before you start going there. That's the best way to not have problems. Avoid that kind of thing. You need to talk to them, see how they do things. That's really, really important. Yeah, that's very, very, very important. Anyways, there are some no-nos for selling scrap steel, light iron, whatever you want to call it. Now, one big thing is if it's under 30% steel, either under 30 or under 40, your scrapyard probably won't want it. Now, that could be weight, that could be volume, but most likely percentages are usually by weight. So if it's under 40% scrap steel by weight, I would not bring it and expect to get light iron for it. If they see you have a lot of that, they may even reject your load and just send you home. So at that point, you may want to clean some of the plastic off of something. Now, if you have one piece or two pieces like that in an entire large load, that's different. They probably won't complain about that. Now, another no-no is propane tanks. Now, let's say your grill dies, or not grill die, sorry. Your grill runs out of gas and your propane tank is usually older than 12 years. That's when most places will refuse to fill it. So, your thought is, hey, there's some nice scrap, nice heavy scrap steel. No. No, it's not. So, the danger with propane tanks is they could still have pressure in them, they could still have propane in them, something like that. Most scrapyards either won't take them at all or want you to do some processing to them. And this processing could be semi-risky, depending, it's risky. So, what a lot of them will want you to do is they want you to take the nozzle off the top, and some will want you to put a hole in it, cut a sizable chunk out of it, or even they want to shear it in half. So, if you're set up to do that, if you know what you're doing, you know how to do it safely, great, go ahead. And I apologize, my examples are getting very dark. Let me see if I can there we go. Got the light on. So, another big no-no is fridges and AC units, stuff like that. They contain a refrigerant, and most of the time it's called Freon. It's usually, I think it's a compressed gas that goes through compressors and coils, and basically it makes stuff cold. Now, the problem with these refrigerants is most of them are very harmful to the environment. And most scrapyards either, again, won't take fridges at all, or they'll want proof that you removed the refrigerants from it and it wasn't, just cut. They want proof that it was professionally done. Now, you could, if you know an HVAC technician that would be willing to do that for you, great, there you go. Now you can add that to your scrap list. But my recommendation for fridges and propane tanks, don't bother with them. They're not really worth your time. Again, unless you have a good setup, you know what you're doing, you know how to do it. That sort of thing, I would probably just leave them be. If you're a beginner, that's my best tip for you. Now, another thing that's kind of on the lesser end of the spectrum is, believe it or not, a steel rim with a tire on it. I've been to quite a few scrapyards that have turned away a tire with a rim on it, even in a dump truck load worth of stuff. Most scrapyards do not want them. Again, some are more picky than others. You gotta ask them. But usually, you can probably have one in with a large load, but I wouldn't go with any more than that. And if they say don't bring them, then don't bring them. The reason is the tires are really hard to recycle. They don't want to deal with the rubber. Their buyers may not even want it. Because the buyer, the company that buys it from your scrapyard, which could even be a larger scrapyard that shreds stuff up or whatever, they dictate how your scrapyard buys scrap from you. If they say we don't want propane tanks in our mix, then your scrapyard can't accept propane tanks in your mix. Now, a lot of scrapyards will have things like the fridges, the AC units, and the propane tanks. They'll usually have it somewhere in the office, or in the non-ferrous shed, somewhere where you can see it. Most scrapyards will have that sort of thing. And if they don't have it posted up somewhere, you may want to reevaluate your scrapyard. A good scrapyard will have that information right there for you. Now, if you do, whether accidentally or on purpose, mix in a propane tank that's been unprocessed, as well as a fridge, if they find out that you did that, they will usually charge you for it. Or at the very least, subtract that weight from your total bill, and either you're paying them to deal with it, or you don't get paid for that item. And who knows, some may even just dock your entire bill for it, so you don't make anything off that load. Again, every scrapyard's different. You need to find out. Most places will have the repercussions on that piece of paper, on that sticker, whatever. So, read that. It's important. Now, to get paid, most likely what will happen is you'll go into the office, and they'll take your license, especially if you're in America. Most states, it's a law just to deal with scrap theft, stuff like that. They'll take your license, they may take your name in town, something like that. And most scrapyards here in America, at least, will still pay you by cash. Some may offer like an account where you could do direct deposit, or even like pick up at the end of the month, if you do multiple loads a day at the end of the day, something like that. I definitely know scrapyards do that, but not all of them. Especially if it's a smaller one, they're probably only going to pay you in cash. But some of the other larger scrapyards now have even moved away from cash at all. Like they will not give you cash. They'll either give you a check or direct deposit to your bank. We'll see where that goes in the future, but for now, most yards will reliably just give you cash. So, I think that's really the basics. Again, separate your non-ferrous. That's important. That'll help you make oodles more money than if you just threw everything into one bin. So, again, check my videos. Check the iScrap app's videos. Other people on YouTube have some good videos on how to identify different non-ferrous metals. But this was just a how to get started, what to do, what to look out for, what not to do, kind of how you should do research. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I think you can also email me through the channel, possibly. Feel free. If you have questions, you can email me. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Yeah, you know. So, thank you for watching. Good luck, and I hope you have fun on your scrap journey. It's a lot of fun. You get to break stuff and get paid for it. It doesn't get much better than that. So, thank you for watching, and enjoy.